It has happened to you. I'm almost certain of it. You were thinking of someone you hadn't spoken to in a long time, someone who had drifted quietly out of your days, and then, that same afternoon, out of nowhere, they called. Or a word you had never heard before in your life arrived one morning, and by evening you'd met it 3 more times, in a book, in a conversation, on a passing sign, as though the world had decided to teach it to you all at once. Or a number began to follow you, appearing on clocks and receipts and doorways, until you started to feel half embarrassed that it was trying to get your attention. Or you were humming a song with no idea why, and then it played. That exact song, in the next room or the next shop, and a small shiver went through you. Or, in a moment when you badly needed to hear something, a stranger said the exact words, or a book fell open to the exact page, and for a second the boundary between the inside of your life and the outside of the world seemed to thin, and you felt, quietly and unmistakably, that something had just spoken to you. And then, most likely, you told yourself it was nothing, a coincidence, and you let it go because that's what reasonable people do. But some part of you didn't quite let it go, did it? Some part of you filed it away in that private, unspoken collection we all seem to keep. The collection of small impossible things that happen to us and that we've never really explained. Tonight, I want to open that collection with you. Gently, the way we do here, with nowhere to be and nothing to prove. I want to sit with one of the oldest and strangest human experiences there is, the experience of meaningful coincidence, and ask the question we usually rush past. Not just why coincidences happen, but why they feel the way they feel. Why a coincidence, when it lands, doesn't feel like chance at all. Why it feels like a message. Why it feels sometimes like being seen. And I'll tell you now, before we begin, where this is going to go, because I think it's stranger than it sounds. We're going to do something that might seem, at first, like the opposite of wonder. We're going to hand the skeptic every tool they have. We're going to look honestly and carefully at the mathematics of coincidence, the real mathematics, the kind that dissolves most of these small miracles into simple, unremarkable arithmetic. And we will dissolve most of them. That's a promise, but here's the part worth staying for. When we're done, when we've explained away everything the mathematics can explain, there will be a residue, a small handful of coincidences that refuse to come apart, that the numbers touch but cannot quite dissolve. And those are the ones I want to be sitting with when the night gets quiet. So if you find yourself drifting before we reach them, let this be the thread that holds you here. The best part comes after the mathematics, not before it. So settle in, let your body grow heavy. You don't need to follow every word or hold on to anything or reach any conclusion by the end. Let this simply be a voice in the dark while you drift, wondering with me about the strange fact that we live in a world where things line up, and where the lining up so often feels like it means something. Let me start by being honest about what we're actually asking, because it's easy to get this wrong in both directions. I am not going to tell you that the universe is literally speaking to you through coincidences. I don't know that, and I'm wary of anyone who claims to. But I'm also not going to tell you that your experiences are foolish, or that the feeling of meaning you get from a coincidence is simply an error to be corrected. Because that feeling is real. It's one of the most common experiences human beings have, and it has shaped religions and love stories and life-changing decisions, and the private inner worlds of nearly everyone who has ever lived. Something that universal, something that powerful, deserves better than to be waved away. So we're going to do something harder than believing and harder than dismissing. We're going to take both the mathematics and the meaning completely seriously at the same time and see what's left standing when we do. And let me say something about how common this really is, because I think we all carry these stories more privately than we should. If you were to ask the people around you, quietly, one at a time, whether they'd ever had a coincidence that genuinely unsettled them, that felt like more than chance, almost every single one of them would say yes. And then, if you gave them a moment, they would tell you a story, and it would be a good one, and their voice would change a little as they told it, because these stories matter to us in a way we rarely admit. We don't tell them at dinner parties because out loud, stripped of the feeling, they sound absurd or superstitious or like we've lost our grip. So we keep them to ourselves, which means that nearly everyone is walking around with a private catalogue of small impossible things, convinced secretly that something strange once happened to them, and equally convinced that they must be the only one. You are not the only one. That collection you keep, everyone keeps one. The experience of the meaningful coincidence may be one of the most universal secrets there is. And they come in kinds, these coincidences, in recognizable shapes, and I suspect, as I name them, you'll feel your own memories rising to meet each one. There's the coincidence of the person, thinking of someone the moment they appear, or reach out, or cross your path in a city where neither of you lives. There's the coincidence of the word or the number, the thing you noticed once and now cannot stop noticing, following you everywhere you turn. There's the coincidence of the meeting, the stranger who turns out to know someone you love, the seatmate on a long journey whose life mysteriously mirrors your own. There's the coincidence of timing, the phone call that comes at the precise moment you needed it, the opportunity that arrives on the exact day the old door closed. And then there are the ones that are harder to speak about at all, the dream that seemed to know something before it happened, the strong feeling about a person that turned out, against all reason, to be right. Each of these has visited nearly everyone, and each of them, when it visits, carries that same unmistakable signature, that quiet inner voice that says, surely that wasn't random, surely that meant something. So let's begin where an honest mind has to begin, with the mathematics and with the strange machinery of our own perception. Because here is the first thing that has to be said, and it's genuinely important, and it will not diminish the wonder at all, I promise, though it may look for a while like it's about to. Most coincidences, the overwhelming majority of them, are not strange at all. They only feel strange because our intuition about probability and about our own minds is catastrophically, almost comically bad. We are simply not built to feel how likely the unlikely actually is, nor to notice how our own attention shapes what we find. Let me start with that word or number that follows you, because it's the most familiar coincidence of all, and its explanation is one of the most delightful. You learn a new word today, and then, suddenly, it's everywhere. You hear it on the radio driving home. You see it in a headline. A friend uses it in a text. Within days, it feels as though the whole world has conspired to surround you with a word you'd never encountered before. And the natural feeling is that something has changed out there, that the word has somehow become more common, that the universe is pushing it toward you. But here's what has actually happened, and it's stranger and more intimate than any conspiracy. The word was always there, appearing at exactly its normal rate all along. What changed was not the world. What changed was you. The moment you learned the word, your mind quietly flagged it as significant and switched on a filter and began, without ever telling you, to notice every appearance of it that it used to let pass unremarked. And on top of that, once you'd noticed it 2 or 3 times, a second effect kicked in. The simple fact that recent things feel more frequent than they are. So a handful of ordinary sightings gets remembered as a flood. This has a name, this trick of attention. It's sometimes called the frequency illusion. And what makes it so important for us tonight is what it reveals. It reveals that a great deal of coincidence is not the world arranging itself around you. It's your own attention silently, selectively, deciding what to let you see. You are not being shown a pattern, you are building one out of the raw noise of an ordinary day without knowing you're doing it. The sender of the message, in this case, was you. Now hold on to that, and let me show you the mathematics, because it's just as humbling. Imagine a room with just 23 people in it, a small gathering. Now ask yourself, what are the odds that 2 of those people share the same birthday, the same day and month? Most people, feeling their way toward an answer, guess something small. The odds feel like they should be low. There are 365 days in a year, after all, and only 23 people. Surely the chance is tiny. But it isn't. In a room of just 23 people, the odds that 2 of them share a birthday are better than even, better than a coin flip. Get to 70 people in a room, and the odds climb past 99%. It becomes almost certain. And when 2 of them discover they share a birthday, they will feel a little jolt of the miraculous, a small sense of destiny, of what are the chances, when the truth is that the chances were overwhelming all along. Our intuition simply couldn't feel it. The reason is subtle and beautiful, and it's this: you're not comparing your birthday to everyone else's. Every person is being compared to every other person, and the number of those hidden comparisons grows far faster than the number of people. The connections multiply invisibly, and that right there is the seed of almost everything we're going to say tonight. The connections multiply invisibly. Now take that lesson and make it enormous. There is an idea in mathematics, sometimes called the law of truly large numbers, and once you understand it, coincidences start to look very different. The statisticians Percy Diaconis and Frederick Mosteller, who studied coincidence seriously and with great care, put it plainly. With a large enough number of opportunities, any outrageous thing is not just possible, it becomes likely, even inevitable. Think about what a single day of your life actually contains. Thousands upon thousands of small events. Every glance, every thought, every word overheard, every face passed, every song, every number, every stray association your mind makes as it wanders. Now multiply that by all the days of your life, and now multiply that by all the billions of people alive, each of them living their own dense, event-crowded days. In a world that vast, running for that long, an event with odds of 1 in a million is not rare at all. With enough people and enough moments, a 1 in a million thing happens millions of times. It happens somewhere, to someone, constantly, all day, every day. The truly astonishing coincidence isn't the exception in a world this large. It's the guarantee. Someone, right now, is winning a lottery they had no business winning, dreaming of a friend who is about to call, meeting a stranger who will change their life. In a world of billions, the 1 in a billion event happens to somebody every single day, and to that somebody, it feels like fate. There's a lovely, precise version of this that comes from a Cambridge mathematician named John Littlewood, and it makes me smile every time I think about it. He wanted to take the idea of a miracle, an event so unlikely we'd call it miraculous, and pin a number to it. Let's say a miracle is a 1 in a million event. Now, how often does a person experience one? Littlewood reasoned roughly like this. During the hours we're awake and alert, we perceive and register something like 1 event per second. Over the course of a day, that's tens of thousands of events, Do the arithmetic across a few weeks and you arrive at his gentle, startling conclusion. On average, a person should expect to experience a 1 in a million miracle about once a month, simply from being awake and paying attention and letting the world stream through you. Miracles in this sense are not rare visitations from beyond. They're a monthly feature of an ordinary life printed into the arithmetic of being a conscious creature in a busy world. It's sometimes called a Littlewood's Law of Miracles, and I find it one of the most quietly wonderful ideas I know, because it doesn't kill the miracle at all. It just tells you where they live. They live in the sheer, overflowing abundance of events. There are so many moments that some of them are bound to rhyme, and there's something even stranger about randomness that I have to tell you, because it's the exact opposite of what everyone assumes. We imagine that true randomness is smooth, even, spread out. We imagine that if the world were really just chance, coincidences would be rare, and things would be nicely, evenly distributed. But that is not how randomness behaves at all. Real randomness is lumpy. It clusters. It clumps together into streaks and runs and knots that look, to our pattern-hungry eyes, exactly like meaning. If you scatter grains of sand truly at random across a floor, you will not get an even sprinkle. You will get clumps and gaps, dense little clusters here and bare patches there. And if you didn't know better, you'd swear someone had arranged them. Flip a truly fair coin long enough, and you will get long runs of heads that feel impossible, that feel rigged, that feel like the coin has a will. But those runs are not the absence of randomness. They are its signature. This is sometimes called the clustering illusion, the way we look at the natural clumps of pure chance and read purpose into them. And it means that a run of coincidences, 3 strange things happening in a single week, until you feel the universe is surely trying to tell you something, may be nothing more than randomness doing exactly, precisely what randomness always does. Clumping. Because a world without any coincidences at all, a perfectly smooth and evenly spaced world, would actually be the strange one. That world would be the one that required an explanation. Ours, full of clusters and rhymes and streaks, is simply what chance looks like from the inside. I haven't even mentioned the strangest mathematical fact of all, which is that even pure randomness, left completely to itself, cannot stay patentless. There's a whole branch of mathematics, sometimes called Ramsey theory, that has shown something that sounds almost impossible when you first hear it. In any system large enough, some kind of order, some pattern, some structure, is not just likely, but mathematically unavoidable. Complete, perfect disorder cannot exist past a certain size. Try to make a truly patternless arrangement of enough things, and you will fail every single time, because order forces its way in whether you want it or not. Scatter enough stars across a sky, and you will find shapes in them, lines and clusters and figures. Not because anyone drew the shapes, but because in enough scattered points, shapes are guaranteed. The constellations were never out there in the stars. We drew them, from a scattering that mathematics promised would contain drawable things. And this is a genuinely humbling thought. The patterns we find in the world are sometimes there for the simplest reason imaginable. In a big enough world, patterns cannot not be there. The universe is, in a certain sense, condemned to be full of coincidences, whether anything means them or not. So already you can feel the ground the skeptic stands on, and it's solid ground, and I don't want to pretend otherwise. Most of your small impossible things really do come apart under all of this. But there's one more piece, and it's the most personal of all, because it's about memory, and it's about the quiet editing your mind is always doing to your own life. Consider again the old friend who called the day you thought of them. Now consider how many people you have thought of, on how many days who did not then call. Hundreds, thousands, you've forgotten every one of those, completely, because nothing happened and nothing is not memorable. But the one-time thought and phone call lined up, that one you kept, because it felt like something. This is a habit of the mind so deep it barely feels like a choice. We notice and remember the hits, and we quietly discard the misses. And so, our private catalogue of coincidences is a catalogue with the failures silently edited out. It's a highlight reel, and a highlight reel always looks like destiny, because destiny is exactly what you get when you remove every moment where nothing meaningful happened. Your own memory is the editor, and it has been quietly cutting your life into a story of meaningful coincidences your whole life long, discarding the vast ocean of non-events in which those coincidences actually floated. And underneath even that, there's a deeper reason coincidences feel like meaning, and this is the part I find genuinely moving rather than merely clever. Your mind is not a neutral recording device. It is, at its very core, a pattern-finding machine, built by a long history of survival to detect connection and meaning everywhere it possibly can. And there's a reason it errs so far, on the side of finding patterns, even false ones. Imagine you are an ancestor of ours, long ago, and you hear a rustle in the tall grass. It might be the wind, it might be a predator. Now consider the two ways you can be wrong. If you assume it's a predator and it's only the wind, you've lost nothing but a moment of fear. But if you assume it's the wind and it's a predator, you've lost everything. So the mind that survived, the mind that became yours, is the mind that leaned hard toward seeing the pattern, toward finding the agent, toward assuming that something was behind the rustle. We are the descendants of the ones who saw meaning in the grass, and that same ancient machinery, tuned across millions of years to never miss a signal, is still running in you tonight. Some who study this suggest we carry what might be called a hyperactive agency detector, a deep instinct to sense a someone, a will, a mind behind events, even when there is only chance. It's the instincts that made our ancestors see a spirit in the storm and a purpose in the harvest, and it's the same instinct that makes a coincidence feel like a message from a sender. When two things line up, your mind doesn't calmly calculate the odds. It leans forward and whispers, "That means something. Someone did that. Pay attention." There's a word for this tendency to find meaningful patterns in unconnected things: apophenia. And its gentler cousin, the one where you see faces in the clouds and in the fronts of cars and in the shadows on the wall, is called pareidolia. We are, all of us, magnificently, helplessly built to find the face, to find the pattern, to find the sender behind the message. We came into being as meaning finders. It's not a flaw in us. It may be the deepest thing about us. It's worth knowing that people have tried seriously to catch coincidence in the act, to prove it was more than chance, and the story of one of them is a small cautionary gift. Around a century ago, an Austrian biologist named Paul Kammerer became convinced that coincidences were not random at all, that they obeyed some hidden law he called the law of seriality. He spent hours in parks and cafes, notebook in hand, recording every coincidence he could find. The same name appearing twice in a day, the same number, the same word, patiently building a catalogue of the world's rhymes, certain he was on the trail of a great undiscovered principle of nature. And what he actually discovered, though he couldn't see it, was something about himself and about us. He discovered that if you go looking for coincidences with enough devotion, you will find them everywhere, because they are everywhere, because in a world this large, they cannot help but be everywhere. His grand law dissolved into the same simple truth we keep arriving at. Seek patterns, and a patterned world will always oblige. His notebooks are less a record of nature's hidden order than a portrait of the human mind doing the one thing it was built to do, finding meaning tirelessly in the noise. So there it is, the skeptic's case laid out honestly and in full. The frequency illusion, where your own attention builds the pattern. The birthday paradox, where the connections multiply invisibly. The law of truly large numbers, which makes the impossible inevitable. Littlewood's monthly miracle. The clustering of true randomness, which looks so much like purpose. The unavoidable patterns mathematics guarantees in any large enough world. The highlight reel of hits with the misses, quietly deleted. And the ancient, meaning-finding, agent-detecting mind that would always rather see a pattern that isn't there than miss one that is. Put it all together and you have a powerful, elegant, and largely correct explanation for the vast majority of coincidences. They are the natural exhaust of a huge world running through a mind built to find meaning in it. And if I stopped here, I would have made a fine, sensible video, and you could sleep soundly, disenchanted and safe. But I'm not going to stop here. Because I told you there would be a residue, and there is. Here is what all of that mathematics, for all its power, quietly cannot do. It can tell you how often coincidences happen. It cannot tell you what they mean. And meaning, it turns out, is the whole thing. Meaning is what we were talking about all along. Let me show you the gap, because it's easy to miss and everything turns on it. The mathematics can prove, beautifully, that in a world this large, someone, somewhere, was bound to think of a long-lost friend at the very moment that friend called. That's guaranteed, the numbers demand it. But the numbers are completely silent about something else. They cannot tell you why it was you, why it was this friend, the one you'd been quietly grieving the loss of, why it happened on this particular evening, the evening you'd finally, after years, been ready to reach out, why it arrived carrying exactly the significance it carried, landing in exactly the tender place it landed, feeling unmistakably like an answer to a question you had been silently asking. The mathematics explains the coincidence. It says nothing at all about the meaning, and the meaning was the only part you cared about. Do you see the strange shape of this? Probability lives in the world of the general. It speaks in aggregates, in populations, in millions of events happening to millions of people. It can tell you what is bound to happen to someone. But your experience of a meaningful coincidence is radically, achingly specific. It happened to you once, and it was about your life, and it meant something to you that it could not have meant to anyone else on earth. And that specific, personal, meaning-drenched quality is precisely the thing the mathematics has no language for and no interest in. You can explain the frequency of coincidence completely and still not have touched, not even slightly, the thing that actually moved you. The wonder was never really in the improbability. It was always in the meaning, and the meaning is exactly what survives the mathematics untouched. This is the gap that one of the most careful minds of the last century spent years staring into. Carl Jung, the psychologist, noticed that certain coincidences in his patients' lives and his own seemed to be connected not by cause, but by meaning. Ordinary events are connected by cause. One thing pushes another, which pushes another, in a chain you can follow, link by link, back to its source. But Jung kept encountering pairs of events that were linked by no possible chain of cause, that could not have influenced each other in any physical way, and yet were bound together by a meaning so precise and so pointed that calling it mere chance felt, to him, like a failure of nerve. He gave this a name: synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence of two events with no causal connection between them. And our causal connecting principle, he called it, reaching for language, a way that things might be joined by significance rather than by force. There's a story he told that has become famous, and it's worth hearing, because it captures the exact texture of the thing. He had a patient, a woman whose relentless rationality made it almost impossible to help her, because she had an answer for everything and let nothing through, no feeling, no doubt, no opening. One day she was telling him about a dream she'd had the night before, in which she was given a piece of golden jewellery shaped like a scarab beetle. As she spoke, Jung heard a gentle tapping at the window behind him. He turned, opened it, and a beetle flew in, a rose chafer, the closest thing his cold northern climate had to a golden scarab. A beetle that had, for no reason anyone could ever name, chosen that exact window in that exact moment to try to enter the room. He caught it gently in the air and turned and handed it to her and said in effect, "Here is your scarab." And something in her cracked open. The coincidence was so precise, so impossibly well timed, so exactly matched to the meaning of the moment, that it undid in an instant the armour that months of careful reasoning had failed to touch. Now, a mathematician could tell you that beetles tap on windows all the time, and that in a world of enough therapy sessions and enough dreams, one such matchup was bound to occur somewhere, someday, to someone. And the mathematician would be right. But the mathematician would have explained everything except the only thing that mattered, which was what it meant, and what it did, and why it arrived exactly then, for exactly her. And here is a detail that I find genuinely striking, and that fits this whole exploration better than almost anything. Jung did not develop this idea alone in the soft and speculative territory of psychology. He developed it in deep, sustained conversation with one of the most rigorous physicists of the 20th century, Wolfgang Pauli, one of the founding minds of quantum mechanics. A man known for a skepticism so severe that his colleagues only half joked that he could break experimental equipment simply by walking into the room. In fact, that joke became its own small legend, the so-called Pauli effect, the idea that sensitive instruments would fail in his presence, a running joke among serious physicists that Pauli himself, delightfully, rather enjoyed. Here was a man at the absolute peak of hard science, and even his colleagues had wrapped a coincidence legend around him. And this same man sat with Jung for years, the two of them genuinely convinced that the strict wall we've built between mind and matter, between meaning and the physical world, between the inner and the outer, might not be as solid as everyone assumed. They wrote a book together. They wondered, out loud and in print, whether meaning might be woven into the fabric of things in a way our neat categories couldn't capture. I want to be careful here. They did not prove anything. Synchronicity is not established science, and I won't dress it up as if it were. But there is something worth pausing on, in the simple fact that it was not two dreamers who took this seriously. It was a master of the human mind and a master of the physical atom, meeting in the middle, both of them unwilling to dismiss the possibility that coincidence and meaning run deeper than chance. And this is where I want to bring in physics itself, very carefully, because this is exactly the place where honest wonder tips over into nonsense, if you're not careful. And I would rather lose your excitement than mislead you. So let me be precise. Physics has not shown that coincidences are messages. It has not shown that the universe is speaking to you. Anyone who tells you that quantum mechanics proves synchronicity is selling you something, and I won't. But here is what is true, and it's enough. Over the last century, physics has discovered, again and again, that the universe at its deepest level is far stranger, far more interconnected, and far less like our common sense picture than anyone ever expected. It has found that particles can be linked across great distances in ways that made even Einstein deeply uncomfortable. Their states correlated so intimately that measuring one seems to settle the other instantly, a connection real enough that it now underpins working technology. And I have to add, in the same breath, honestly, that this connection cannot be used to send a message, cannot carry your intentions, cannot be the secret wire behind your coincidences. The physics is stranger than magic, but it's also stricter than magic. But the larger point stands, and it's the one that matters tonight. The universe has already turned out to be far more connected, far more participatory, far more resistant to our tidy separations than the confident, sensible worldview ever imagined. And in a cosmos that has surprised us that thoroughly, that has quietly dissolved so many of the walls we were certain were solid, the honest posture toward a question like, could meaning and matter be linked in some way we don't yet understand, is not certainty in either direction. It's humility. The person who says it's obviously impossible and the person who says it's obviously true are making the very same mistake. They are both claiming to know the shape of a mystery we have only barely begun to see the edges of. And it's worth pausing to notice how ancient and how universal this impulse really is, because it tells us something about ourselves that no single explanation quite covers. For as long as there have been human beings, there have been human beings reading meaning in the alignment of things. Nearly every culture that has ever existed built careful, serious practices around it. The Romans watched the flight of birds and the patterns of the sky before making their great decisions, convinced the world would show them a sign if only they knew how to look. In China, for thousands of years, people have cast coins or stalks and read the falling pattern against the ancient text of the Book of Changes, treating the chance arrangement of a single moment as a meaningful answer to the question in their heart. People have read meaning in tea leaves, in scattered stones, in the lines of a hand, in the turning of cards, in the shapes of clouds and the calls of birds. We tend to look back on all of this as superstition, as the errors of minds that didn't yet have science, and perhaps a great deal of it was. But step back far enough and notice the astonishing thing that unites all of it, across every continent and every century. Human beings have always, everywhere, refused to believe that meaningful coincidence is simply nothing. The conviction that the alignment of things can speak, that chance can carry a message, is not a modern confusion or a passing fashion. It is one of the oldest and most universal features of the human mind, woven through every culture we have ever built. And something that deep, that persistent, that shared across all of humanity, may be a simple error we've all made together, or it may be pointing at something about the relationship between mind and world that we have never fully understood, and have never quite been able to let go of. Jung himself was fascinated by the Book of Changes for exactly this reason. He saw in it an ancient technology built entirely around synchronicity, around the idea that the chance moment mirrors the meaning of the mind that meets it. He wasn't sure what to make of it. Neither am I. But I notice that the impulse it serves is one I feel in myself, and one I suspect you feel too, and one that every people who have ever lived seem to have felt as well. And of all the shapes coincidence takes, there is one that seems to haunt people more than any other in our own time, and that is the coincidence of numbers. Perhaps there is a number that follows you. Perhaps you find yourself glancing at a clock again and again at the same moment, the same repeated digits, until you begin, almost against your will, to feel that the number is somehow watching you back. Perhaps a date, an address, a total on a receipt keeps returning to you. This is one of the most common coincidences people report, and much of it, we now understand, is exactly the frequency illusion we spoke of earlier. Your own attention quietly flagging a number as significant and then noticing it everywhere. It was always quietly appearing. But notice again the shape of the feeling, because the feeling is the interesting part. It is not merely how strange that I keep seeing this number. It is, this number is trying to tell me something. Even here, in something as abstract and empty as a repeated digit, the meaning-finding mind reaches instantly for a sender, for an intention, for a someone behind the pattern. We cannot help it. Show us a coincidence, even a coincidence of pure numbers, and we will feel, somewhere beneath our reasoning, that it means, that it is meant. That is not a fact about numbers, it is a fact about us, and about how deeply, how tirelessly, all of us long to be spoken to. Now let me bring this down out of the heights and back into the texture of an actual life, because this is where meaningful coincidence does its most powerful work, and where its residue is hardest to dismiss. Think about how the most important things in your life actually came to you. Think about how you met the people who matter most. Follow the thread back honestly, and you will almost always find that it hangs on a coincidence so fragile that it takes your breath away. If you hadn't missed that train, if you hadn't taken that one job you almost turned down, if your friend hadn't insisted you come to a thing you didn't want to go to, if you'd left 5 minutes earlier or later on the one ordinary day that turned out not to be ordinary at all, the whole architecture of a life, the loves, the friendships, the turning points, so often rests on a single unrepeatable alignment, a coincidence that, had it gone the other way, would have meant a completely different existence. And here is the strange thing about these. The mathematics tells us, correctly, that some such coincidence was bound to shape everyone's life, that near misses and chance meetings are simply how large, dense human worlds work, but that general truth does nothing to soften the specific vertigo of realizing that everything you hold most dear balanced at one moment on an accident. We look back at those hinge point coincidences and we cannot help but feel that they were meant, that some hand guided us onto that train or into that room, because the alternative, that the most meaningful things in our lives arrived by sheer chance, is almost too much to hold. And I don't think we should be too quick to correct that feeling, because whatever its source, it points at something real. Your life really did turn on those moments. They really were, in the only sense that matters to you, the most important events that ever happened. And whether they were meant or not, treating them as sacred, as worthy of awe, may be simply the truest way to feel about the fragile, improbable, unrepeatable fact of your own particular existence. There's a darker cousin to those turning point coincidences, and it deserves a mention because it grips us just as hard, maybe harder. It's the near miss, the averted disaster, the flight you didn't take, the road you didn't drive, the decision that, for no reason you could name at the time, you made differently, and that you only later realised had kept you from harm. The person who overslept and missed the train that crashed. The traveller who changed plans on a sudden whim, and so was nowhere near the disaster when it came. These stories haunt us even more than the happy ones, because they carry a distinct shiver. The shiver of having been watched over, of some unseen hand having reached out to steer us gently clear. And here too, honesty requires the same patient accounting. For every person who avoided disaster by a strange chance, there were others, though we rarely hear from them, whose strange chance led them straight into it, who followed an odd impulse and met the very thing the lucky one dodged. We remember the saves and not the losses, because the saved are here to tell the story and to marvel at it, and because a near miss that ends in survival is exactly the kind of vivid, meaning-drenched event the mind was built to keep forever and replay. And yet, even knowing all of that, even accounting for all of it, the feeling of the averted disaster remains one of the most powerful a person can have. The sense of having been, for one moment, protected by something. Whether anything protected you or not, the awe is honest, and the quiet gratitude it leaves behind is one of the sweetest and most humbling feelings a life can hold. And then there are the hardest ones of all to speak about, the coincidences that seem to reach forward in time, the dream that appeared to know something before it happened, the sudden, unaccountable feeling about a person or a place that turned out, against all reason, to be right, the thought of someone you hadn't considered in years on the very day it later turned out that something happened to them. I want to walk carefully here, because this is the territory where wonder most easily loses its footing. And so, I'll tell you honestly what an honest mind has to say. We dream every single night, many dreams, most of them forgotten by morning. Across a lifetime, that is a staggering number of dreams, filled with people and events and fears and images. By the pure law of large numbers we've already met, some of those countless dreams are bound occasionally to line up with something that then happens, purely by chance. And when one does, we remember it forever, and we forget the tens of thousands that didn't. And so we build, again, a highlight reel that looks like prophecy. That is the honest account, and I believe it explains a great deal. And yet I would be lying if I told you it dissolves every case cleanly, with nothing left over. Because some of these, the ones people carry most quietly, are so specific, so precisely matched, so exactly timed, that the honest response is not the confident explanation and not the eager belief, but the simple, humble admission, I don't know what that was. And I've come to think there's more courage and more honesty in sitting inside that not knowing than in rushing to either shore. So where does all of this leave us sitting here in the dark, between the mathematics and the meaning? It leaves us, I think, in the most honest and the most interesting place there is. It leaves us with a residue that neither side can fully claim. The skeptic is right that most coincidences are the arithmetic of a large world and the tricks of a pattern-hungry mind. The believer is right that the meaning they carry is real and is left completely untouched by that arithmetic. And in between, there remains a small number of coincidences, the ones in everyone's private collection, that arrive with a precision and a timing and a personal significance so pointed that the honest response is not to explain them and not to worship them, but simply to stand before them and admit, quietly, I don't know what that was. Let me stay with the feeling of these, the real ones, the ones that don't come apart, because the feeling is the most important evidence we have, even if it isn't the kind of evidence that settles anything. What is it actually like, the deepest sort of meaningful coincidence? It is not merely surprising. Surprise is easy and cheap. It is the specific, uncanny sense of being addressed, of the coincidence being for you. When the right words arrive from a stranger, at the very moment you're quietly breaking, when the sign appears at the exact crossroads where you've been paralysed with indecision, when something you desperately needed to hear reaches you through a channel that could not possibly have known you needed it, the feeling is not, what are the odds? The feeling is, quietly and overwhelmingly, someone knew. Something saw me. The universe, for one moment, seemed to lean in close and speak in a language made not of words but of arrangement, of timing, of the sudden meaningful alignment of things that had no earthly business aligning. And whatever the truth of it, whatever the source, that feeling of being seen is one of the most profound experiences a human being can have, and it changes people. People reorder their entire lives around a single such moment. They find their way out of despair on the strength of one perfectly timed coincidence. And a thing that powerful, whatever its ultimate cause, is not nothing. Its effects are as real as anything in the solid physical world. A coincidence that pulls a person back from the edge or redirects a whole life has genuinely done something, regardless of whether we can ever say what did it. And there is one kind of meaningful coincidence that carries more weight than all the others, that almost everyone who has lived long enough eventually knows, and that no honest exploration of this could ever leave out. It is the coincidence that arrives after we lose someone. Almost everyone who has grieved deeply has a story like this, held close, rarely spoken. In the days or the weeks after a death, something happens. A particular song, their song, plays at an impossible moment, in a place it had no reason to be. A bird none of you had ever seen before comes and settles at the window and simply stays. A clock stops. A familiar scent drifts through a room for no reason at all. A word, an image, a small object that belonged entirely to them, appears exactly when the grief is at its very heaviest. And in that moment, the one who is grieving feels, with a certainty that no argument can touch, that their person is somehow near, that they are being reassured. That love, impossibly, reached back across the greatest distance there is. Now I have to be honest here, the way I've tried to be all night, because you deserve nothing less. Grief sharpens the mind's search for meaning to its finest and most desperate point. We are never more alert for a sign, never more primed to find one, than in the raw, open aftermath of loss. And the world, full as always of songs and birds and small coincidences, quietly obliges. That is very likely a large part of what is happening. But I want to say the next thing carefully, because it matters more than almost anything else tonight. Even if that is the whole mechanism, even if every one of these signs is the grieving mind finding meaning in an abundant world, the comfort it brings is not therefore false, and the love it expresses is not therefore an illusion. When a coincidence lets a grieving person feel, for one moment, that the bond with someone they lost was not simply erased from the universe, something real and true and good has happened, whatever its ultimate cause. I would never take that from anyone, and I would never want to, and I've noticed that the people who have received such a sign almost never need it to be scientifically proven to them. They know what it meant, and what it meant was real, and was theirs, and was enough. And I've noticed something else, sitting with my own small collection over the years, that I want to offer you gently, not as a claim, but as an observation about how to live. The people who dismiss every coincidence instantly, who pride themselves on explaining each one away before they have even finished feeling it, live in a particular kind of world. A flat one. A world where nothing reaches toward them and nothing means anything it wasn't explicitly assigned to mean. And the people who believe every coincidence is a literal message from beyond live in a different kind of trap, exhausting and full of false signals, reading destiny into every repeated number and every stray sign until they can barely make an ordinary decision. But there is a third way to hold this, and it's the one I keep returning to on the quiet nights. You don't have to decide whether the universe is speaking. You only have to be willing to listen, to let a strange coincidence be strange, to pause when the world rhymes and pay attention, and hold the moment open instead of slamming it shut with an explanation or inflating it into a certainty. Because whether or not anything is truly speaking, the person who listens lives in a more enchanted, more attentive, more awake world than the person who cannot stop explaining. And attention, in the end, might be the only thing any of this is really asking of us. Not belief, not skepticism, just attention. Just the willingness to notice when your life seems, for a moment, to be trying to tell you something, and to sit with the wondering instead of rushing to close it. There is a genuine wisdom in this middle way, and I want to name why it matters. Because the same faculty we've been exploring all night is a double-edged thing, and learning to hold it well is one of the quiet arts of a life. The mind's hunger for meaning, its gift for finding pattern and sensing the sender behind events, is the very root of some of the most beautiful things we are capable of. It is where poetry comes from, and reverence, and the sense that our lives are woven into something larger than ourselves. But that same faculty, left to run without any patience or humility, is also the root of some of our worst confusions, the false certainties, the superstitions that trap people, the elaborate patterns of meaning that connect what was never connected and lead a mind astray. The instinct that lets you feel the universe rhyme is the same instinct that, unchecked, can convince you the whole world is a message aimed at you alone. And so the task is not to kill the faculty, which would flatten your world into something grey and closed, nor to surrender to it completely, which would unmoor you from reality altogether. The task is to hold it with both hands, warmly and lightly at once, open to wonder and honest about doubt, letting the coincidences move you without letting them command you. That balance, that gentle, awake, unhurried attention that neither believes everything nor dismisses everything, may be one of the most mature and difficult things a person can learn. And a night like this, spent turning the question over slowly, is a small practice in exactly that art. Because here is the deepest thing, I think, the thing underneath the whole question, and it's where I want to leave you tonight. When we ask whether the universe is speaking to us through coincidence, we're really asking something even larger, something we almost never say out loud. We're asking whether meaning is something we find out there in the world, or something we make in here, in the mind. And we assume, without ever examining it, that those are opposites. We assume there's a clean, bright line between the world, which is out there and indifferent and full of dumb matter, and the mind, which is in here and warm and full of meaning, and that a coincidence is only truly a message if the meaning came from the outside. But what if that line is not nearly as clean as we've always been told? What if the mind that finds the meaning and the world that provides the coincidence are not two separate things staring across an unbridgeable gap, but somehow, at some level we don't yet understand, part of a single fabric, folded together more intimately than our tidy categories allow? That's the question Jung and Pauli were really circling. From their two different directions, that's the question physics keeps quietly reopening every time it dissolves another wall we were certain was solid. And it's a question your own experience of coincidence puts to you personally every single time your life seems to rhyme. Where does the inside end and the outside begin? Is the meaning in you, or in the world? Or is that very distinction one of the illusions we'll someday look back on with a gentle smile at how sure we were? I don't have the answer. I want to be honest about that to the very end. But I've come to feel that the coincidence, that small, strange, uninvited rhyme in the fabric of an ordinary day, is one of the places where that great question comes closest to the surface, where you can almost feel the seam between mind and world, and sense how thin it might really be. And that question, the question of where your mind actually ends and the world begins, of whether the boundary of you is truly where you've always assumed it is exactly where this path leads next. But it deserves its own quiet night. and we've wandered far enough for this one. So let me leave you, as the night settles, with something small to carry, held lightly, nothing you need to believe. The next time a coincidence finds you, and it will probably sooner than you'd expect, Littlewood promised us roughly one small miracle a month. Try something other than explaining it away, and try something other than deciding it's a sign. Just notice it. Let it be strange. Let it be unexplained. Feel the little jolt of the world rhyming. And instead of rushing to name it, hold it open for a moment, the way you'd cup your hands around something fragile and alive. You don't have to know what it is. It's enough tonight to know that you live in a universe strange enough, and abundant enough, and interconnected enough, that things line up all the time, and that some of those alignments will reach you carrying a meaning so precise, you'll never quite be able to prove it wasn't meant for you. That's not a lesser truth than certainty. In a way, it's a greater one. To live inside a genuine mystery, awake to it, neither dismissing it nor pretending to have solved it, might be the most honest and the most beautiful way to be a conscious thing in a world this strange. So rest now. Let the day's small coincidences drift back through your mind if they want to. The thought that met a phone call, the number that followed you, the word the world seemed to teach you all at once, the song that played just as you hummed it. You don't have to decide what any of them were. Let them simply be part of the quiet, ongoing strangeness of being alive, of being a meaning-finding creature in a pattern-filled world, listening in the dark for a voice you can never quite confirm and never quite dismiss. And if, in the days ahead, your life should rhyme again, should line up in some small, impossible way that makes you pause and catch your breath, I hope you'll remember this. You are not foolish for feeling that it meant something, and you are not naive for wondering. You're simply awake and paying attention in a universe that has never once stopped surprising the people who bother to watch it closely. Whether or not it's speaking, it's worth listening. It has always been worth listening. Sleep well, and should the world whisper to you tonight, in a dream, in a coincidence, in some quiet alignment you didn't expect and can't explain, let yourself simply listen without needing to be sure. That listening, that open and unhurried attention to the sheer strangeness of things, may be the truest answer any of us ever gives to the question of whether the universe is speaking. Not yes, not no, just I'm listening, I'm here. Go on, good night.